Is it possible to be happy? A great many people wonder whether or not happiness even exists in this modern, rushing world. Very often, an individual can have $1 million, he can have everything his heart apparently desires, and is still unhappy. We take the case of somebody who has worked all his life. He's worked hard. He's raised a big family. He's looked forward to that time of his life when he at last could retire and be happy and be cheerful, have lots of time to do all the things he wanted to do. And then we see him after he's retired, and is he happy? No. He's sitting there thinking about the good old days when he was working hard. Our main problem in life is happiness. The world today may or may not be designed to be a happy world. It may or may not be possible for you to be happy in this world. And yet, nearly all of us have the goal of being happy and cheerful about existence. And then very often we look around at the world around us and say, well, nobody could be happy in this place. We look at the dirty dishes in the sink, and the car needing a coat of paint, and the fact that we need a new gas heater, we need a new coat, we need new shoes, or we just like to have better shoes, and say, well, how could anybody possibly be happy when actually he can't have everything he wants? He's unable to do all the things he'd like to do, and therefore this environment doesn't permit a person to be as happy as he could be. Well, I'll tell you a funny thing, a lot of philosophers have said this many, many times, but the truth of the matter is that all the happiness you'll ever find lies in you. You remember when you were maybe 5 years old and you went out in the morning and you looked at the day, and it was a very, very beautiful day. You looked at flowers and they were very beautiful flowers. 25 years later, you get up in the morning, you take a look at the flowers, they're wilted. The day isn't a happy day. Well, what's changed? You know, they are the same flowers. It's the same world. Something must have changed. Well, probably it was you. Actually, a little child derives all of his pleasure in life from the grace he puts upon life. He waves a magic hand and turns all manner of interesting things into being out in the society. Where does he do this? He goes down, he looks at the cop. Here's this big, strong brute of a man riding this iron steed up and down. Boy, he'd like to be a cop. Yes, sir, he'd sure like to be a cop. 25 years later, he looks at that cop riding up and down, checking his speedometer, and says, doggone these cops. Well, what's changed here? Has the cop changed? No, just the attitude toward the cop. One's attitude toward life makes every possible difference in one's living. You know, you don't have to study 1,000 ancient books to discover that fact, but sometimes it needs to be pointed out again, that life doesn't change so much as you. The day when you stop building your own environment, when you stop building your own surroundings, when you stop waving a magic hand and gracing everything around you with magic and beauty, things cease to be magical. Things cease to be beautiful. Well, maybe you've just neglected somewhere back in the last few years to wave that magic hand. You know, other people seek happiness in various ways. They seek it hectically. It's as though it's some sort of a mechanism that exists. It's made up. Maybe it's a little machine. Maybe it's something that's parked in a cupboard, or maybe happiness is down at the next corner. Maybe it's someplace else. They are looking for something. Well, the odd part of it is the only time they'll ever find something is when they put it there first. Now, this doesn't seem very creditable, but it is quite true. Those people who have become unhappy about life are unhappy about life solely and completely because life has ceased to be made by them. Here we have the single difference in a human being. We have that human being who is unhappy, miserable, and isn't getting along in life, who is sick, who doesn't see brightness. Life is handling, running, changing, making him. And here we have somebody who's happy, who is cheerful, who is strong, who finds there is something worth doing in life. What do we discover in this person? We find out that he is making life. Now there's actually the single difference. Are you making life, or is life making you? And when we go into this, we find out that a person has stopped making life because he himself has decided that life cannot be made. Some failure, some small failure, maybe not graduating with the same class, maybe that failure that had to do with not marrying quite the first man or woman who came along and seemed desirable. Maybe the failure of having lost a car, or just some minor thing in life started this attitude. A person looked around one day and said, well, I've lost. And after that, life makes him. He doesn't make life anymore. Well, this would be a very dreadful situation if nothing could be done about it. But the fact of the matter is, it's the easiest problem of all the problems man faces. Changing himself and changing the attitudes of those around him. It's very, very easy to change somebody else's attitude. Yet you are totally dependent upon other people's attitudes. Somebody's attitude toward you may make or break your life. Did it ever occur to you that your home holds together? Probably because of the attitude the other person has toward you. Well, so there's two problems here. You have to change two attitudes. One, your attitude toward somebody else. And two, their attitude toward you. Well, are there ways to do these things? Yes, fortunately, there are. For many, many, many centuries, man has desired to know how to change the mind and condition of himself and his fellows. Actually, man hadn't accumulated enough information to do this up to relatively few years ago. But we're living in a very fast-paced world. We're living in a world where magic is liable to occur at any time, and has. Man now understands a great many things about the universe he lives in which he never understood before. And amongst the things which he now understands is the human mind. The human mind is not an unsolved problem. 19th century psychology did not solve the problem. That doesn't mean that it hasn't been solved. In modern times, the most interesting miracles are taking place all across this country and across the other continents of Earth. What do these miracles consist of? They consist of people becoming well. It consists of people who were unhappy becoming happy once more. It consists of abolishing the danger inherent in many of the illnesses and in many of the conditions of man. And yet the answer has been with man all the time. Man has been able to reach out and find this answer. But perhaps man himself had to change. Perhaps he had to come up into modern times to find out that the physical universe was not composed of demons and ghosts, to outlive his superstitions, to outlive the ignorance of his forebears. Perhaps he had to do everything, including invent the atom bomb, before he could find himself. Well, he has pretty well mastered the physical universe now. The physical universe is to him now rather a pawn. He can do many things with it. And, having conquered that, he can now conquer himself. The truth of the matter is, he has conquered himself.